The wind howled like a wild beast, tearing across the frozen valley, carrying sharp knives of ice in its breath. The sky was white, heavy with snow, and the ground was a cruel sheet of ice that cracked under weak feet. In the middle of this endless storm, an alien mother wrapped her arms around her small child, trying to shield him from the cold. Her cloak was thin, her hands numb, and her body weak from hunger. The child whimpered softly, his face pale, his lips turning blue. She whispered to him again and again, "Hold on, little one, just hold on." But she knew the truth. If the storm did not stop soon, they would not survive the night. Her people had left her behind. They had called her weak. They had called her child a burden in her village. Only the strong were allowed to stay. The rest were cast out to die. She had begged for mercy, begged for a chance to prove her worth. But no one had listened. Now, here she was, walking through the storm with frozen tears on her face. Each step felt like the last. Her child's weight grew heavier in her arms. She could no longer tell where the path ended or began. The snow blinded her. The wind screamed in her ears. Suddenly, through the white veil of snow, she saw a shape. At first, she thought it was only her mind breaking, a shadow made by the storm. But then it moved, tall and steady, walking against the furious wind. The figure grew clearer. A man, broad-shouldered, wrapped in thick gear unlike anything she had ever seen. His head was covered by a helmet that shone faintly through the ice. The alien mother froze, fear gripping her heart. She had never seen such a being before. He was not of her people. His form was strange, his steps too steady, his eyes, glowing faintly behind the visor, turned toward her. For a moment their gazes met, and she felt both fear and a strange spark of hope. The child coughed weakly, and the sound caught the stranger's attention. Without a word, he moved closer. The storm seemed to fight him, but he pushed through it, each step strong, each breath steady. He stopped only a few feet away, towering over the mother and her child. The alien mother whispered, "Stay back." Her voice cracked with weakness. She was too afraid to trust, too afraid this creature might be like her own people, ready to cast them aside. But the stranger did not speak. Instead, he slowly knelt down, lowering himself to their level. She saw his face through the visor, human, scarred, weathered by many storms. His eyes were sharp, but filled with something she had never seen before. Compassion. Gently, he reached out, pointing at the child. His hand trembled not with fear, but with urgency. The mother clutched her son tighter, shaking her head. But then the child let out a faint cry. A cry so thin it was almost swallowed by the storm. The human did not wait. He pulled off his heavy jacket and wrapped it around the child with quick, firm hands. The cold hit his own body at once, but he ignored it. He pulled the boy close against his chest, protecting him from the freezing wind. The alien mother gasped. Her eyes widened. She could not believe what she was seeing. No one in her tribe would have given even a scrap of cloth to save her child. Yet this stranger, this human, gave away the one thing keeping him warm. She whispered, almost to herself, Why would you do this?" The man did not answer. He simply adjusted the jacket around the child and gave her a short nod. Then, without hesitation, he turned and gestured for her to follow. His arm pointed toward the shadows of the cliffs in the distance. The mother hesitated. Her instincts told her not to trust, but the storm was merciless and her child's breathing was shallow. She looked at the stranger again, his back straight, his steps firm, carrying her son as if the child were his own. Something stirred inside her chest, something she had never felt before. Hope. And so, with trembling legs and frozen hands, the alien mother followed the brave human into the heart of the storm. The ice still cut at her skin. The wind still screamed. But for the first time, she was not walking alone. The storm howled louder as the human carried the child in his arms. His thick boots crushed the snow, leaving deep tracks behind. The alien mother followed close, her weak legs shaking, her eyes locked on her son. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. A stranger, a human, was holding her child tighter than even her own people had done. Every step forward was a fight against the storm. The snow slapped against their faces. The ice threatened to pull them down. But the human moved with strength, his back bent slightly to shield the boy from the harsh winds. He kept his arm firm as if no force in the world could take the child from him. The alien mother tried to speak through the roar of the storm. "Why are you helping us?" she shouted. Her voice cracked, carried away by the wind. The human did not answer. Instead, he looked back at her, his eyes meeting hers for just a moment. In those eyes she saw no cruelty, no judgment, only determination. She stumbled once, her foot slipping on the frozen ground. Her knees struck the ice, sharp pain shooting up her legs. The human stopped instantly. He shifted the child carefully into one arm and reached out his hand. She hesitated, fear running through her body, but the storm gave her no choice. She placed her frozen fingers in his. His grip was strong, warm even in the cold. He pulled her up as if she weighed nothing. Then he placed her hand firmly against his own coat, guiding her forward. It was a simple action, but to her it was something unbelievable. No one had ever pulled her up when she had fallen. No one had cared. Until now, minutes passed like hours. The storm raged, but ahead, through the white curtain of snow, she saw a dark shadow, a cliff face rising high. Beneath it, a small opening in the rock glowed faintly with the promise of shelter. The human moved faster now, pushing against the wind, his steps heavy but certain. When they reached the cave, the human ducked inside first, still holding the child close. The alien mother stumbled after him, her body collapsing against the cave wall as the sudden stillness wrapped around her. No more biting wind, no more sharp snow, only the sound of her own shaking breath. The human knelt on the ground, carefully laying the child on a flat stone surface. He pulled a small pack from his side, opening it with quick hands. From inside he took strange tools and packets she had never seen before. One small device sparked with fire, and soon a flame burned bright in the cave. Heat spread slowly, chasing away the icy air. The alien mother crawled forward, her eyes wide. She whispered, "Fire. You made fire in this storm?" Her people could not light flames during such weather, but this man had done it in seconds. The human ignored her words. Instead, he tore open one of the packets and pulled out strips of dried food. He chewed one quickly, then placed another near the child's lips. The boy was too weak to move, but the human gently pressed it, urging him to swallow. Finally, the boy took a small bite. The alien mother's chest tightened. Her child had been close to death, yet here he was, eating again because of this human. She whispered, "Thank you." Her voice broke. She had said those words many times in her life before, but always to beg for mercy. This was the first time she said them with real meaning. The human gave her a short nod, his face serious. His eyes stayed on the child. He removed his own gloves and held the boy's hands near the fire, trying to bring back warmth. His skin turned red from the heat, but he did not care. The alien mother moved closer, sitting beside her son. She looked at the human's hands, rough and scarred, hands that had clearly seen many battles. And yet those same hands now held her son as gently as falling snow. For the first time in her life, she wondered if strength and kindness could live in the same heart. Her people had always said compassion was weakness. They had taught her that only the strong survived. But this man, he risked his strength to protect her child. He gave warmth, food, and even part of his own body's safety. The child coughed again, then slowly opened his eyes. His small voice whispered, "Mama." The alien mother's tears came freely. She touched his face, whispering back, "I am here, my love. I am here." She looked at the human once more. Her heart was no longer filled with only fear. Something else had entered, something she had never known before. Trust. The storm still raged outside the cave. Its voice roared through the valley like an angry beast, but in that small shelter, something stronger than the storm had been born. A fragile bond between an alien mother, her child, and the human who refused to let them die. And deep inside her heart, she felt the first spark of a thought she could not yet speak aloud. Maybe this human was not just a rescuer. Maybe he was the answer to a life she never believed possible. The cave walls glowed softly from the fire. The storm outside still roared, but its voice was muffled now. The alien mother sat close to the flames. Holding her child in her arms, his breathing was weak but steady. His small face warmed by the heat, the human sat on the other side of the fire, silent and watchful. For a long time, only the crackling of the flames filled the space. The alien mother's eyes kept moving between the child and the human. She wanted to speak, to ask who he was, to know why he risked his life for them. But fear still held her tongue. What if he was only helping for his own gain? What if he expected something in return? The human reached into his pack again, pulling out a small metal container. He poured water into a cup and placed it carefully in front of her. The steam rising from the cup shocked her. Warm water. In the middle of this endless frozen world, she had not even dreamed of such a thing. Her lips trembled. She looked at him and whispered, "For me?" The man gave a simple nod, his face unreadable. His eyes, however, were steady, as if saying, "Drink, you need this." She raised the cup to her lips. The warmth spread through her throat down to her chest. Her body shook as if waking from a long sleep. She pressed the cup against her child's mouth, letting him drink too. The boy made a soft sound, almost like a sigh. The alien mother's heart swelled. She wanted to thank the human again, but the words felt too small for what he had done. After a moment, the human finally spoke. His voice was deep and calm. "Storm will last hours." His accent was strange. The words heavy, but she understood. He pointed at the cave walls, then at the fire. "Safe here, safe." The word echoed in her mind. She had not known safety for many years. Slowly she found courage to ask, "Why? Why help us? You don't know us." Her voice cracked with suspicion and confusion. The man paused, looking into the fire. His face grew distant, as if remembering something. Finally, he said quietly, "Because no one helped me once." The alien mother stared at him. His words were simple, but they carried weight. She could almost feel the pain hidden behind them. For the first time, she realized he was not only saving her child, he was fighting a memory of his own past. The child stirred. His tiny fingers reached out toward the human. The man looked surprised. Then slowly he placed his rough hand near the boy's. The child gripped it weakly, refusing to let go. The alien mother's chest tightened again. She whispered, "He trusts you." The human looked at her. Then back at the child. He said nothing, but his eyes softened in a way she could not ignore. Hours passed. The fire kept them warm. The human carefully tended it, feeding it small pieces of fuel from his pack. The alien mother watched him work, how skilled he was. How calm, how strong. She wondered where he had come from. What kind of world could create such a being? Finally, the storm began to fade. The howling winds outside grew weaker. The cave felt less like a prison and more like a home. The alien mother leaned back against the stone wall, exhausted but unwilling to close her eyes. The human noticed. He took off his outer coat and laid it gently beside her. Gesturing for her to use it, she shook her head at first. Ashamed, but he placed it anyway, firm and silent. Her hands trembled as she pulled the coat over herself and her child. The warmth sank into her bones, and tears rolled down her cheeks, not from pain this time, but from something unfamiliar, compassion. Her people had called compassion weakness. They had exiled her because she begged for her child's life. They had spat on her tears, but this human, this stranger, had shown her that compassion was stronger than cruelty. She whispered into the dark cave, almost to herself, "You are brave." "Human," the man did not answer. He sat near the fire, his body straight, his eyes sharp, guarding them even in his silence. The alien mother finally allowed her eyes to close. Her child slept peacefully against her chest. For the first time in years, she did not fear the night. And as the storm outside slowly died, a new storm rose in her heart. A storm of questions, of hope, of feelings she had never dared to imagine before. Who was this human? Why had fate sent him into her life at the edge of death? And most of all, what would happen when the storm was truly over? Morning came slowly. The storm outside had left the world white and silent. The frozen valley lay under a blanket of snow, calm but deadly. Inside the cave, the fire still burned low, sending faint shadows across the walls. The alien mother opened her eyes first. Her child was curled against her chest, breathing softly, warm under the human's coat. For a moment, she almost forgot the storm. almost forgot the cruelty of her people. All she felt was relief. Her child had survived the night. Across the fire, the human sat with his back against the wall. His head tilted down, eyes half closed. He had not truly slept. He had stayed awake to watch over them, guarding like a silent protector. His face looked tired, but his grip on his weapon never loosened. The alien mother studied him in the quiet. She noticed the scars on his face, the lines that spoke of battles and hardship. She thought of his words from the night before, "Because no one helped me once." She wondered what kind of pain he carried in his heart. What had he lost? Who had abandoned him, the way her people abandoned her? When the child stirred awake, he reached for the human again. His tiny fingers touched the man's hand. The human looked down, startled, but did not pull away. Instead, he let the boy grip his rough skin. His lips twitched, almost forming a smile. The alien mother whispered, "He likes you." The man glanced at her. His eyes calm but unreadable, he said nothing. Yet the silence itself felt like an answer. After a while, the human handed her a small piece of dried food. She took it with trembling hands, breaking it in half and giving most of it to her son. The child ate quickly, his strength slowly returning. She chewed the rest slowly, tasting salt and smoke. It was strange but filling. She dared to ask softly, "What do they call you? What is your name?" The human paused, then spoke one word. "Daniel." She repeated it under her breath. "Dan Hill." The sound felt strange but comforting. She placed her hand on her chest. "I am Sira." She then touched her son's hair gently. "And he is Kale." Daniel gave a short nod, repeating the names quietly. "Sira, Kale." His voice was rough but careful. As if honoring the names, the fire warmed them. But something else warmed Sira's chest now. For the first time, she felt a connection beyond fear, a fragile bond forming in the cold shelter. Kyle, still weak but curious, pointed at Daniel's pack. Daniel raised an eyebrow, then pulled out a small device, a silver square that lit up with faint light. He pressed a button and a tiny projection appeared. A small bird made of light. Flapping its wings in silence, Kale gasped. His tired eyes wide with wonder, he reached out to touch it. His small hands passing through the glowing image, Daniel let the boy play, adjusting the device so more small creatures appeared. Light-made animals leaping and running in the air. Sira's heart tightened. She had not seen her son smile for weeks. But now, in this frozen wasteland, he laughed softly, his voice like music. Her eyes filled with tears she quickly wiped away. She whispered to Daniel, "You gave him joy. You don't know what that means." Daniel looked at her briefly, then turned back to the fire. He said quietly, "I know." For hours they sat in the shelter, sharing food, sharing silence. Kale fell asleep again. His small hand still curled near the light device. Sira sat closer to the fire, her eyes never leaving Daniel. Finally she spoke, her voice heavy with old wounds. "My people, they left me. They said I was weak. They said my son would bring only shame, so they cast us out. They told us to die in the storm." Her voice cracked. "I begged, but no one listened." Daniel did not look surprised. He stared into the flames, his eyes distant. "My people once left me too," he said slowly. "Different reason. Same pain." His jaw tightened, his hand clenching. Then he looked at her, his voice firm. "You are not weak, and your child is not shame." The words hit her like fire in her chest. No one had ever spoken them to her before for years. She carried only scorn and rejection. But this human, this stranger, saw worth where her own people had seen none. Her lips trembled. "Why do you say this? You don't even know us." Daniel's eyes softened. "Because I know what it feels like to be forgotten, to be left with nothing. To be told you are nothing." Sira's breath caught. She wanted to say more, but words failed her. Instead, she lowered her head, whispering, "Thank you." The bond between them grew stronger in that moment. Not with loud promises, but with quiet truths. Outside, the storm had ended. The valley was still and white. The world seemed calm again, but Sira knew danger was never far. Her people's laws were harsh and strangers were not welcome. She feared what would happen if they found her with this human. But as she looked at Daniel, sitting strong and steady by the fire, she felt a strange courage rise within her. For the first time, she did not feel completely alone. The bond had been formed, fragile, new, but unbreakable. And though the world outside remained cold, inside that cave burned something warmer than any fire, hope. The snow outside the cave glittered under pale light. The storm had passed, leaving the valley quiet. The silence felt almost peaceful, but it was the kind of peace that never lasted. Syra knew it. Daniel knew it. Even little Kale, sleeping softly, seemed to sense it. Daniel stepped out of the cave for the first time since the storm. His heavy boots sank into the snow. His sharp eyes scanned the horizon. Every sound, every shadow, every trace on the ground mattered. He saw tracks, long, sharp, not his, not Syra's, not Kale's. The storm had buried most of them, but not all. He returned to the cave. His jaw tight. Others came here, he said simply. Syra's heart jumped. My people, she whispered. Fear filling her voice, Daniel gave a small nod. She hugged Kale closer. If they find us, they will take him away. Or worse, her voice cracked. They will call him unworthy again. They will punish me for surviving when I was meant to die. Daniel crouched near the fire. His scarred face calm but his eyes sharp. They will not touch him, he said firmly. His tone left no room for doubt. Hours passed. They packed what little they had. Daniel's supplies, some food, the glowing device that Kale loved. Syra wrapped Kale in the coat, keeping him warm. They could not stay. The tracks outside meant danger was already near. By midday, they began walking, Daniel leading, Syra close behind, Kale in her arms. The valley stretched wide and endless, snow and ice in every direction. The silence of the frozen world was heavy, broken only by the crunch of their steps. Suddenly, a sound split the silence, voices carried by the wind. Harsh and sharp, Syra froze, her eyes wide. It's them, she whispered, her people. Hunters sent to enforce the cruel laws. Daniel raised his hand. Signaling her to stay low, he moved forward. Crouching behind a ridge of ice, from there, they saw them, 3 figures in dark cloaks. Alien hunters with long spears glowing faintly blue. Their faces were hard, their eyes searching. They were following the tracks, following the trail straight to the cave. Syra's chest tightened, she whispered, We have to run. But Daniel shook his head. No, running makes noise, they will catch us. His voice was calm. We wait. The hunters stopped near the cave, one of them kneeling. His sharp fingers traced the ground where Daniel's boots had pressed into the snow. Here, the hunter growled, his voice was cruel. The exile lives, Syra trembled. Kale whimpered softly. Daniel's hand moved quickly, covering the boy's mouth gently but firmly. His eyes never left the hunters. He studied them, measured the distance, counted their weapons. The hunters began walking again, this time toward the ridge where Daniel and Syra were hiding. Syra's breath came fast. They will find us, she whispered. Daniel looked at her and said one word, trust. As the hunters came closer, Daniel moved, his body low, silent as a shadow on the snow. He disappeared behind the ice ridge. Syra clutched Kale tightly. Fear rising in her chest, she wanted to scream, to beg him not to leave, but her voice was trapped in her throat. Moments later, the first hunter rounded the ridge. Spear raised, his eyes widened when he saw her. He opened his mouth to shout, but Daniel struck. He came from behind, swift and strong. His arm wrapped around the hunter's neck, pulling him down into the snow. The spear dropped with a dull thud. The hunter struggled, but Daniel's strength was unshakable. In seconds, the hunter fell still, unconscious. The other 2 hunters turned at the sound. Their eyes narrowed. They saw their companion fall and hissed in fury. Spears raised, they charged toward Daniel. Syra gasped, clutching Kale tighter. She wanted to run, but her feet would not move. She could only watch as Daniel faced 2 armed hunters with nothing but his bare hands and a stolen spear. The first hunter thrust his weapon. Blue energy crackling, Daniel twisted aside, snow exploding under his boots. He slammed the butt of the spear into the hunter's chest, sending him sprawling. The second hunter came from the side. Faster, sharper. The spear grazed Daniel's arm. Burning his sleeve, he gritted his teeth but did not fall. With a roar, Daniel drove forward, his stolen spear striking hard. The second hunter's weapon flew from his hand. Clattering across the ice, Daniel grabbed him by the cloak, slammed him against the ridge and left him gasping for breath. The last hunter rose again, fury in his eyes. He shouted, The exile cannot be saved. The child must die! His spear glowed brighter, ready to strike. But Daniel stood between him and Syra, tall, unyielding. His voice thundered over the frozen valley. Over my dead body. The clash that followed was fierce. Spear against spear, strength against fury. Syra's heart raced as she watched the human fight not for himself, but for her and her child. Every movement was sharp, every strike filled with purpose. Daniel was outnumbered, outmatched in weapons, but not in will. Finally, with a powerful strike, Daniel shattered the hunter's spear against the ice. The blue glow died. The hunter stumbled back. Defeated, silence returned. The hunters lay unconscious or broken in the snow. Daniel stood tall, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. His arm burned from the wound, blood staining the white snow. Yet his eyes were steady, his voice firm. "They will not take you," he said, turning to Sira and Kyle. Sira's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "You fought for us." Even against death, Daniel looked at her. His face hard, but his words soft. "Family is worth fighting for, even if it is not mine." And in that moment, Sira realized something she had never believed before. This human had already become part of their family. The storm was gone, but the silence it left behind was heavier than the wind. Snow covered the valley like a shroud. Every sound carried far. Every movement left marks. Daniel knew this kind of silence was dangerous. It was the kind that came before trouble. Sira felt it too. Her hands never stopped trembling as she held Kyle. The boy was warm now, his breathing stronger, but the fear in her eyes had not faded. She looked at Daniel, whispering, "They will come for us." Daniel said nothing, but his jaw tightened. He had already noticed what Sira feared. Shadows in the distance, faint tracks across the snow. They were not alone. By the afternoon, the truth appeared. Dark figures emerged across the valley. Moving in a line, their cloaks flapped in the wind, and their weapons glowed faintly blue against the white snow. Alien hunters, Sira's people. Her breath caught, her knees weakened. "They found us," she whispered, pulling Kyle closer. "If they take him—" She could not finish the sentence. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and firm. "They won't." His voice was low but certain. The hunters spread out across the snow, scanning the ground. Their sharp eyes followed the trail left behind. Sira and Kale had no skill in hiding their steps. Daniel had done his best to cover them. But it wasn't enough. The hunters were trained for this. They drew closer, 3 of them, each taller and stronger than Sira. Their faces were harsh, cold like the ice around them. The one in front raised his spear high and shouted, "Exile, show yourself." Sira's body froze. She had heard those voices before. They were the same voices that had cast her out. The same voices that had laughed when she begged for her child's life. Her chest burned with old pain. Kale whimpered softly. His small voice echoed too loudly. One hunter's head snapped in their direction. His lips curled into a cruel smile. "There," he hissed. Pointing his spear toward the ridge, Daniel moved quickly. He pulled Sira and Kale behind the jagged ice, pressing his finger to his lips. "Quiet," he whispered, his eyes locked on hers. Steady, sharp, promising safety. The hunters advanced, their boots crunching over the snow. One of them bent low, running his hand over the frozen ground. "Tracks," he growled. "They cannot be far." Sira's chest heaved. She held Kale close, rocking him gently, praying he would not cry again. The memory of her people's cruelty stabbed at her heart. They would not forgive her for surviving. They would not forgive Kale for being born. Daniel's hand tightened around the shaft of his weapon. He had taken one of their spears earlier, and now he held it ready. His body was tense, not with fear but with purpose. The hunters rounded the ridge, their glowing weapons raised, their cruel eyes narrowing when they saw movement. The leader shouted, "You dare hide? The law is clear. Weak blood must be erased." Sira's blood turned cold. Kale whimpered again, and before she could shield him, Daniel stepped forward, tall and unyielding. His shadow fell over the snow like a wall. He planted the spear into the ground, his voice firm. Over my body, the hunters froze, shock flashing in their eyes. They had expected a broken exile, not a stranger who stood like a warrior. The leader sneered. "Human," he spat the word like poison. "This is not your fight. Leave the woman and the child, walk away, and you may live." Daniel's answer was simple. "No." The hunters laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "You think you can stop us?" One mocked. "You are alone." Daniel's eyes burned like fire. "Alone? No, not anymore." He glanced back at Sira and Kale. "They are with me." Sira's heart pounded, her breath caught. She had never heard anyone claim her as their own. Not like this. Her people had called her nothing. Daniel called her his. The hunters advanced, their weapons glowing brighter. The snow crunched under their heavy steps. Daniel shifted his stance, his muscles ready. He knew the fight would come, and he welcomed it. The first hunter lunged, spear flashing with blue energy. Daniel moved fast, blocking with his own weapon. The impact cracked through the air, sparks flying. He twisted, slamming the spear's butt into the hunter's ribs, sending him crashing into the snow. The second came from the side, swinging hard. Daniel ducked low, rolled across the ice, and came up behind him. His strike was quick, precise, knocking the weapon from the hunter's hand. But the leader was stronger, faster. He charged with fury, his glowing spear cutting the air. Daniel blocked once, twice, but the force drove him back. His boots slipped on the snow. His arm burned from the strike. Sierra cried out, "Daniel!" Cale clutched her tightly, his small voice shaking. "Mama, will he win?" Daniel roared, shoving back with every ounce of strength. His eyes burned, his voice thundered. "I will not let you take them." His spear slammed into the ground. Breaking the leader's balance, he struck again, sharp and hard. Knocking the alien flat into the snow, silence fell. Only the sound of Daniel's heavy breaths filled the air. The hunters lay defeated, weapons scattered. Sierra rushed forward. Tears streaming, she whispered, "You fought them." "For us." Daniel nodded once, his eyes steady. "For family," he said simply, and in that frozen world, Sierra realized this human was not only her savior, he was the shield between her child and death itself. The snow was stained with dark marks where the hunters had fallen. Their glowing spears lay broken across the ice. The valley was silent once more, but it was not the silence of safety. It was the silence before a greater storm. Daniel stood tall, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. His arm bled from a cut where the spear had grazed him, but he didn't flinch. His eyes stayed sharp, scanning the horizon. He knew more would come. Enemies never stopped with only 3. Sierra clutched Cale close, her eyes still wet with tears. Her voice trembled. "They will send others, stronger ones. They will not forgive this." She looked at Daniel. Her fear mixed with something else, faith. "What will we do?" Daniel pulled the spear from the snow and leaned on it. His voice was steady. "We make a stand." Sierra's heart jumped. "A stand?" she whispered. He turned toward her, his eyes fierce. We fight, we hold, we do not run." Not this time. For a moment she could not breathe. No one had ever spoken like that for her. No one had ever chosen to stand by her side. Her own people had cast her away. But this human, a stranger, had decided her life and her child's life were worth fighting for. Daniel began moving quickly, pulling stones and broken ice toward the ridge. He worked with sharp focus, building a barrier, a shield against the open snow. His breath fogged the air, his muscles strained, but he didn't stop. Sierra hesitated, then set Kyle down carefully against the ridge. She joined Daniel, lifting stones with numb fingers. Her body was weak, but determination pushed her. She whispered, "If we must fight, then I will fight too." Daniel glanced at her, surprise flickering in his eyes, but he gave a short nod. "Then we fight together." By the time the sun began to sink, they had a small wall of ice and stone. It was not strong enough to stop an army, but it was enough to slow one. Enough to make a stand. Cale watched with wide eyes, his small voice breaking the silence. "Mama, will we be safe?" Sierra knelt beside him, her hand brushing his hair. "Yes, little one, we will be safe because he is with us." Her eyes lifted to Daniel, who stood like a wall of iron against the fading light. The silence broke with the sound of horns, low, cruel, echoing across the frozen valley. Sierra's heart froze. She knew that sound. It was the call of the hunters' war band. More were coming, not 3 this time, but many. Shadows appeared across the snow. 10 figures, maybe more, moving in a line, their cloaks whipping in the wind, their weapons glowing brighter than before. The leader at the front raised his spear high, his voice carrying over the ice. "The exile defies us!" And with her, an off-worlder. "They will die together." Sierra's hands shook, Cale whimpered, but Daniel's voice thundered back across the valley, strong and clear. "Come then. But know this, you will not take them while I still stand." The hunters laughed cruelly, spreading out to surround the ridge. They expected fear, surrender, but instead, they found a human standing tall, spear in hand, and beside him the woman they had abandoned. No longer begging but ready to resist, the first wave struck. Spears crashed against the barrier of stone and ice. Daniel blocked the strikes with quick, powerful movements. His body moved with skill born from countless battles. Each clash echoed across the valley like thunder. Sierra grabbed a broken spear from the ground. Her hands trembled, but she lifted it anyway. When one hunter climbed over the ridge, She thrust forward, catching him by surprise. The spear cut shallow across his arm, enough to drive him back. Her chest heaved. She had never fought before, but in that moment, she discovered courage. Daniel roared, slamming his spear into the snow and twisting to knock two hunters down. His body bled. His strength was pushed to its limit. But his eyes burned with fire. "You will not have them!" The hunters pressed harder. Their weapons glowed brighter. Their voices hissed with anger. But every time they struck, Daniel struck back harder. Sira stood beside him, shaking but unyielding. Cale cried softly from behind the barrier, his small voice pleading, "Mama, Daniel, please." His words cut through the battle like a blade, reminding them what they were fighting for. Daniel gritted his teeth. Pushing against the force of 3 hunters at once, his voice thundered, "For him! For the child!" With a final burst of strength, he knocked them back. His spear spinning in a wide arc, Sira gasped, tears running down her face. She had never seen such willpower, such strength. And yet she realized, it was not for himself. Everything he did was for her and Cale. The hunters fell back for a moment. "Regrouping," the leader snarled, rage twisting his face. "You cannot fight us all, human." "You are only one!" Daniel planted his feet on the snow, his spear steady, his body bleeding but unbroken. His voice rose like fire against the cold. "Then I will be one against all." The words shook Sira's heart. She whispered to herself, "Compassion is not weakness. It is strength," the hunters roared, preparing to strike again. But something had already changed in that frozen valley. The human had made his stand, and his defiance lit a fire stronger than any storm. The valley shook with the echoes of the battle, spears broken, snow torn apart, breathless cries fading into silence. The hunters lay scattered across the frozen ground, some wounded, some too afraid to rise again. Daniel stood at the center, chest heaving, blood dripping from his arm. His coat was torn, his body bruised, but his eyes still burned with fire. He gripped his spear tightly, ready to fight again if even one enemy moved. Sira held Cale behind the barrier, her heart racing. She had never seen such defiance, such strength. She had never believed any being could fight against so many and still stand. But Daniel had, not for himself, only for her and her child. The leader of the hunters struggled to his feet, his spear broken in half, his eyes burned with shame and rage. He pointed at Sira with trembling hands. "She was meant to die. She is nothing. The child is nothing." Daniel stepped forward, his voice thunderous. "She is a mother, he is her son, and they are everything." The words struck like a hammer for the first time. Sira felt pride where she had always felt shame. Her lips trembled. Her eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "Everything," as if tasting the word for the first time. The leader snarled and rushed forward in a last desperate strike. But Daniel moved faster. His spear slammed into the ground beside the alien's head, the sharp crack echoing across the valley. The leader froze, his body shaking. The human's eyes bore into him. "Cold and unyielding, leave," Daniel said, his voice deep. "Leave now or you will not rise again." Silence. The other hunters lowered their weapons, fear spreading across their faces. They had seen enough. They pulled their leader back, retreating into the snow, their proud voices swallowed by the empty valley. The battle was over. Daniel dropped his spear, his body swaying with exhaustion. Sira rushed forward, Cale still in her arms. She caught him before he fell, her small hands trying to hold his weight. "Daniel!" she cried, "You're hurt." He gave her a faint smile, his voice weak but steady. "I told you. They would not take him." Tears streamed down her cheeks. She shook her head. "You nearly gave your life for us. Why? Why would you fight so hard for someone you barely know?" Daniel looked at her, his eyes softening. "Because I do know," he whispered. "I know what it is to be left alone. I know what it is to be cast away. And I swore no child should suffer that again if I can stop it." Sira's chest tightened. Her whole life she had believed compassion was weakness. But this man had turned compassion into strength. He had faced death with nothing but his will to protect, and he had won. Cale reached out from her arms, his small hand brushing Daniel's face. "Don't go, Daniel," the boy whispered softly. "Stay with us." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, then he placed his hand gently over Cale's. His voice was quiet, almost a vow. "I will." The sun began to rise, golden light spilling across the snow. The valley that had been a place of death now glowed with warmth. For the first time in years, Sira felt the future open before her. Not as exile, not as weak, but as someone worth standing for. They walked away from the ridge together, Sierra carrying Cale, Daniel walking at her side. His steps were heavy, but his presence was unshakable. The hunter's law no longer chained her heart. She had seen a truth far greater than their cruelty. At the edge of the valley, Sierra stopped. She looked at Daniel, her voice steady but filled with emotion. You saved my child, you gave me hope. You showed me compassion when I had never seen it before. From this day, wherever you go, we will follow. Daniel looked at her, the rising sun reflecting in his tired eyes. Then we walked together, he said simply, and so, the exile, the child, and the human left the frozen world behind. Their footprints carved into the snow side by side, proof of a bond stronger than the storm. Sierra held her son close, whispering into his ear, Remember this day, Cale, the day a brave human stood for us. The day we learned compassion is not weakness. It is strength. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows behind them. Ahead lay an uncertain path, but not an empty one. For the first time in her life, Sierra did not walk alone. It was the dawn of something new, not just for her and her child, but for the bond between two worlds. Born in fire, blood, and compassion, a new dawn indeed.